The UB Football Podcast is a BKR Media production. UB Football Podcast postseason edition coming your way. It's usually just me and Scott, not today. Brad Riter with you, along with Scott Wilson and our other broadcast partner, Paul Peck, both joining us on the line, or both joining me on the line, however you want to put it, but joining you. We're here for you. That's the whole point here, is that we're here for you. Guys, we have not actually sat down, aside from at the stadium, have not sat down and talked about the final game of the year, the win in the Bahamas Bowl, the fourth consecutive bowl win for the Bulls. They now improved to 4-3 overall in bowl games, and a really nice conclusion to a really impressive and encouraging, I would say, season for the future of the Bulls. I guess, Paul, why don't you tell us what you're thinking about right now, a couple weeks removed or a week and a half removed from the season coming to its end?
Well, specific to the bowl game, I think going into it, we felt like the Bulls had an advantage of wanting to be there, being inspired to be there, having a purpose to play well and end the season strong. I don't know that Liberty had quite that same inspiration tied to the players that they look. I think you're laughing at me, Scott. Tied to the players they lost. The fact that they were in the Fiesta Bowl last year and the Bahamas was a step down, right? And then the game played out that way, right? You saw. I keep going back to something Pete Lembo said to me in one of the post-game interviews, and I think he was referring specifically to Red Murdoch, but I think he could have referred to the entire team as using the word possessed, right? Like, you just saw in the game in the Bahamas how hard and how important the Bulls wanted to play, how hard they played to want to win that game. And that's the lasting impression that it leaves with me, that it was just another amazing coaching job in a season full of amazing coaching jobs.
I'll tack on to that a little bit and just saying, from physically being there for that week, it felt a lot like the last time we were there against Charlotte, which is, hey, our guys are practicing and their guys are not practicing. It was very clear.
Hard skills.
Exactly. You'd be going to practice and walking through the casino and you'd see their players, and they were there on vacation with a game. And then put on top of that, I don't think the players that they had left respected the Bulls at all. And that's because last year, they had quite the performance at UB Stadium. They really looked good last year, and they were good last year. They were undefeated until the Fiesta Bowl. So I think that there's a lot of carryover from that game. Like Paul said, them in their mind going from the Fiesta Bowl to the Bahamas Bowl and playing a team that they beat by 30 the year before, and whatever, even though we lost some players, we're not going to be as good as we have been all year, but we'll probably be able to roll out there and do what we want to do. And then the first play happened, and it felt over from the very first play when Dion came in and popped a guy for a tackle for loss. And, as we know from football, if you're in the game, it's too late, man. You missed your chance. If you're not ready come game time, there's no amount of speeches that a coach can give you that's going to save you from the preparation that didn't happen. And I think that all of that, combined with the fact the Bulls were highly motivated, and even if Liberty had its full contingent of players, I still think the Bulls probably would have won that game. I think they were overall a better team this year than Liberty was. And it's just great to end the season with a win like that. And for these guys that have gone through a lot and gone through coaching changes and the upheaval in the offseason, to really just, go all in on a coach and a guy that they just met, just before spring practice, and say, all right, we believe it. We believe in you. We're just going to throw all the chips in the middle of the table with you and have it be rewarded like that was great. And to cap off a season that was so fun. So many of the games were just really fun. to be there and watch. It was awesome.
And, you think about the mentality of that team, the Liberty team going into that game. It's almost the inverse of what you saw last year. Just looking at what we saw this year about how things improved with the new coach, hearing the things we've heard this year about how things were under the previous regime, you had a group in UB that believed in everything it was doing in the Bahamas Bowl. And you had a Liberty team that was missing players, remembering what it was like previously when they were better, when they were more highly regarded, when they had a better season. So it's just mentality overall. They were complete and utter opposites, and it showed, like you said, from play one of that game in the Bahamas.
I think it's always a good lesson, when you watch football, that a motivated, well-prepared team that plays as a unit together can always be the more talented team. A team that may have more individually talented players. And I think that was the example. I mean, there were times in the Bahamas Bowl in the first half where, you could see their athletic ability in shutting down Al.J. Henderson and some of the other things that the Bulls wanted to do offensively. You're like, wow, they're really fast. They're fast. They're fast and quick, like the team I remembered last year coming in and just being at a different level, compared to the MAC team. And I think you saw signs of that, but when you just took too many of their difference-making players out, combined with the fact that, as Scott said, the Buffalo team was better than Liberty's collection of individual players. I think it's a great lesson for any time in football. A team that is giving 100% all the time always has the chance to beat a team that's giving somewhat less, but may actually have better players.
And I haven't watched the TV broadcast back. I know, Paul, I think you did.
I did, yes.
So I don't know if you didn't listen to the radio broadcast. Did they mention on TV that the starting quarterback for Liberty had to get stitches in his arm because he was on the water slide? Okay, so if you listen to the radio broadcast, you would have known at kickoff that we had found out that their starting quarterback had a huge wrap on his arm and wasn't feeling 100% because he had to get 3 to 4 stitches on his arm going down a water slide at the Atlantis Water Park. I mean, that's the microcosm of the whole situation right there. And probably not a coincidence that he ran across Red Murdoch a couple of times and fumbled both times when somebody hit his arm. And that ended up being a big factor in the game as well. Red came in there, smelled some blood, quite literally, and knocked out the ball a couple of times.
I was hoping you would say
a
literally.
Real shark in the water in that case.
I felt it coming. I was hoping for the word literally, and there it was. Speaking of Red Murdoch, the one, I'm not even going to say dark cloud because I don't think we saw a cloud the entire time we were down in the Bahamas. But one thing that was kind of hanging over the team was, hey, look, all these Liberty players are in the portal. UB really hasn't been impacted by players jumping into the portal. And there was a little fear, at least I had it. We didn't talk about it a lot, but well, yeah, if I'm going to transfer, I'm going to wait till after my trip to the Bahamas. So there was a little of like what's going to happen in the, 5-day window that's available to the Bulls after this game. And not a peep, really, right? I mean, there's the weird Agbana thing that I'm struggling to understand. UB says he's not eligible to play anymore, and he still thinks he is or something. But aside from that, nothing. I mean, Murdoch is the main one we were thinking about. Like, who's watching this game, and what are they thinking about that guy blowing up everything that Liberty is trying to do when they've got deep pockets and the ability to just go buy our players? But so far, so good, right?
I was convinced, somebody who needs a linebacker goes, call that guy up, right? But when on the TV copy, when they interviewed Red after the game, he specifically in one of his answers mentioned the fact that the Bulls had one of the fewest totals of players go into the portal before their bowl game than anyone in the country. He mentioned that on ESPN2. When I heard him say that, I said, okay, I feel a little better now because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have been saying that if he was thinking of being the next guy to go in, right? So that was my moment where I'm like, okay, I think we can exhale for a few months here, there's a pretty good chance that arguably next year's best player, there's a good chance he'll be next year's best player.
I got that from your.
I understand that.
I got that from him from your interview with him afterward. He didn't maybe say it as explicitly, but I got the vibe from him, and then also your conversation with Sean Dolak, where he was talking about the things Red would be doing for the Bulls next year, and certainly implying that this guy's not going anywhere. So that all felt good, but to actually get through the window feels even better.
No question.
He has a chance to come back next year, and the only reason why he wasn't the top in the country in several defensive categories individually this year was because he played next to Sean Dolak, who was. He's number 2 in a lot of categories this year because he played with Sean. So, I mean, if he comes back and has a similar season next year to this year, he'll lead the country in tackles, and he's going to be very close to breaking the record for forced fumbles.
Yeah.
Like he's got a real good look at doing that next year, breaking Khalil Mack's record. I mean, he had two in the bowl game. So, he's definitely going to be the player to watch next year for sure, because he is like already on the doorstep of like major records, not just school records, but like major defensive records already. So yeah, it's been awesome that he's still a Bull. When you see him play in that bowl game and just, like Coach said, go possessed for 3 hours and completely dominate a game, you do start worrying like, oh, no, I know we're not the only ones watching. Most specifically, not only were we not the only ones watching, it was like the highest rated bowl, a Bahamas Bowl, in a long, long time, if not ever. So there was a lot of people watching as the early football game leading into the NFL slate at the end of the day. And, you had a little bit of concern, but, that window is passed. He's still here. I know there's another small window in the spring, but he's from everything we've heard, specifically from Paul in your interviews after the game, it seems like he's pretty content in coming back.
Who else did enter the portal, Scott?
CJ Agbana did, which is an odd situation. I asked several different people there during that Bahamas week, hey, now that the ruling came down that's going to allow an extra year to people that played in a junior college, is he eligible to come back? And they all said no, and then explained like this long reason of NCAA clock and play clock and the timing clock, and there's all these different rules that I'm not qualified to rattle off now, but all of them said no, unfortunately he is done. So I don't know, maybe he's being told different by somebody else, I don't know, but he's in the portal. Javian Cuff is a guy that we saw a couple of times this year make some nice plays. He is in the portal. Bodie Ogg, who is a backup tight end, is in the portal. And then also, I believe the long snapper is in the portal as well. And obviously, if you want to count Upton Belenfant, who was the kicker in the Bahamas Bowl, is a Texas Tech Red Raider. But I think the fact that he already was kind of agreed to go down and play for Texas Tech, he still said, I love this team. I've been a part of this team. I want to finish this season with this team. And, he's got money on the line because he's going down south, and he still decided, no, I made this commitment, and I love this team, and I love the coaches here, and I want to finish off the season here. So he stuck around, and I think that says something as well, just kind of the direction that they're going. Even though people are going to be on other teams, they're still willing to put it on the line one more time to stay in the blue and white.
Did you overhear
Pete Lemble letting him stay too? Like a lot of coaches won't do that. A lot of coaches like, if you're either with us, you're against us, right?
Right.
And if you're leaving, you're not staying. And I think selfishly, Pete wanted to have his kicker, right? But I think the broader question is that I think he felt like he owed it to the rest of the guys on the team to go in as well armed as they could to try to win this bowl game. And again, it wasn't a hard decision for Pete, but it was a decision because we've seen a lot of coaches go the opposite route in a situation like that. Like, you're not going to be with us next year. leave now. So credit to Pete for letting that play out as well.
Well, and credit to his teammates who were giving him crap the whole time. Scott, I think you were with me on the plane as we were walking in. He couldn't find a seat. He couldn't find a place to put his bag or whatever it was. And everyone's just like, figure it out, Red Raider. You got this. Come on, Red Raider. And it was all
right.
that. So they got to mess with him too, but obviously in a sort of jovial way. It's like, yeah, you had the opportunity to get paid and go play at a bigger school. We're not mad at you, but we are going to mess with you because we've got that kind of team. We've got that kind of friendship. We've got that kind of bond. And that, again, is just very encouraging about the atmosphere that exists in Amherst under Pete Lembo. Let's talk Dolak. All-American. Obviously, he's on his way out, but not invited to any of the All-Star games, which is, I'm not going to say shocking because we've seen this sort of thing before, but it seemed as though his production this year and the big play ability, in addition to just racking up crazy numbers, would have likely given him an opportunity to get there. He doesn't get invited to any of those games. That makes me fear for the combine for him. I still think he's going to get a look from an NFL team for sure. You can't not notice what he's done. But I don't know. What do we think about the Dolak sort of postseason, the transfer situation from or transition, I guess is the word I'm looking for, from college to NFL? He's not being included with the upper tier athletes, which again is not shocking, but is a little disheartening.
I'm always torn by these kinds of discussions because he was as dominant a player as we've ever seen here, and you can't ignore that. And I always go back to an old Marv Levy quote when the Bills were having so much success drafting small college guys, and Marv would always say he better have dominated at the level that he was at for us to even think about him being an NFL player. Well, Sean checked that box, right? He was dominant at his level, right? But then you flip it around, and we've all followed the draft enough over the years to know how it works. First off, he plays a position that's not highly valued as much as it used to be, right? So that's kind of strike against him, one. He's not very big. He's not 240 pounds, right? He's 6 foot 225-ish, right? That's strike against him, number two. He was a former walk-on, which tells you that doesn't mean it hasn't changed, but at some point, physically, he wasn't a guy that was a Division I caliber athlete at that point in his life, right? Strike, that's another strike against them. So, it goes towards answering some of the questions about why he isn't at the All-Star games, right? But I don't know how anybody that is looking for a linebacker later in the draft can't look at his season and go, give me that guy. That guy can work. He just makes plays. He's everywhere he needs to be. He's going to have to perform physically very well at his pro day. As we saw with Joe Andreessen, that was the tipping point for him to get a chance in the NFL. The draft is all about your physical skills. Love it or hate it, particularly the first 4 to 5 rounds of the draft are all about your physical skills. And Sean's going to have to meet those levels in order to at least get himself in the conversation.
He's a bit of an unknown that kind of exploded on the scene this year to most of America and everyone else. Not to us. We saw him 2 years ago be great, and then last year he got banged up. He got hurt. He didn't play a whole lot, so he kind of disappeared from the radar and popped back on it here this year in a big way, being a consensus All-American and leading the nation in tackles, top 5 in TFLs, 5 picks, led the nation in interception return yardage. He was all over the field, and I think we noticed right from day one in that Lafayette game saying, whoa, Dolak looks a lot faster than I remember. And I think, like Paul said, just some of the tape measurables give him a check against him, and he's going to have to show up and run a good time. That's going to be his end. I think that he's got the tape to prove, he's got the tape and the instincts to prove it, that he can play and that he can make plays. I mean, he's got a couple of tackles on that reel against Luther Burden in the flat. again, at Missouri, where we were like, whoa, that's a pretty nice little tackle there. So, he's played some big time competition and made plays. And, I think he's just, like Paul said, he's going to have a nice pro day to get a look. For Bills fans, I think it's a huge advantage for them being that they are here in town. And we have seen they've got 3 Bulls on their team. None of them drafted. All of them because they have the exposure to the UB program and a relationship with the coaching staff to know what's what. I mean, Coach Leipold, we know, went to bat for Cam Lewis and was like, this is the toughest player that I've ever had. This is one of the best players I've ever been around. This is a dude, at least give him a look. You're going to want to give him a look. And I think that, at the very least, Sean's going to have that behind him because, as we've talked with coaches, they'll all stand on their desk and pound for him. So he's going to have to just show up and run a good time because he is a little bit of an unknown commodity and he doesn't have the media guide 6'2", 238, was heavily recruited by West Virginia and Penn State, but also went to UB. So he's fighting up some of those stereotypes. But once he proves it in that pro day, if he can, he's got the tape to back it up. So then it puts him in a real good situation then.
Where do you think the backflip on the sand in the Bahamas plays into this? Where does that show up? Does he get to put together his own film? Because I would cut out the dancing before and after it because I don't think that's getting him anywhere.
Right.
But the backflip itself, barefoot in the sand with a backpack on, is pretty impressive too.
Well, if he makes a roster, I would keep some of that dance footage as some type of rookie. Rookie type of
hazing
thing where he can come in, right? A rookie type of thing where he can run in there and try to do some type of teaching of people how to dance. But as far as the highlight tape goes, I would probably cut the dancing out.
Yes. It's not.
I did a bit of a deep dive into some of the stats about a week or so ago, and we just finished saying that unfortunately Sean's stats and numbers might not mean anything, but that doesn't take away from what he did. And I'll throw a couple of them at you because they're mind-boggling. He had 168 tackles this year. That's the 10th most season tackles in NCAA history. Only 9 guys have ever had more tackles in the season. He had 391 career tackles, essentially in only 2 seasons because he missed most of one season and he was a backup for his other season. So 391 tackles, 12 sacks, 40 TFLs, 6 interceptions, and a touchdown in his career. Like those are crazy. Those are crazy numbers and beyond dominant. Like if you watched them like we did, you didn't need the numbers to show you that. If you didn't and you look at the numbers, you go, wow, those are pretty impressive. And they're not just padded stat kind of numbers either.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, he'll do really well in any sort of interview setting as well, which is something we don't talk about a lot, but it's impossible not to like him and want him around when you talk to him. He's the exact right kind of crazy that I think you want in your building, regardless of what team you are. So who knows where it ends up for him, but like you said, anybody who knows him is going to pound the table for him. So if anybody asks anybody at UB about this guy, they're going to hear nothing but good things. And if you interview him, you're going to think nothing but good things. And if you watch the tape, you're going to think nothing but good things. And now he's got to run a good 40 time to get into the club so that all the other stuff becomes a factor. But, we'll see how all that goes. We talked about the negative side of the portal, and that is players leaving. It is a place to find a new quarterback. What do we know about the new guy that's coming in? We interrupt the podcast for a rare audio insertion, if you will. Realized after the fact, after the full recording was concluded, or had concluded, that we never mentioned the name of the quarterback that we were talking about, and it is Taquan Roberson. Taquan, T-A''Quan, Roberson from K-State, just like L. Roberson from K-State several years ago, but no relation to our knowledge. Scott looked into it, and we can find no connection between new Bull quarterback Roberson and former K-State quarterback Roberson, although the new Bull quarterback is also a former K-State quarterback. Back to the show.
Well, he's been a couple of different places. He had some time at UConn, suffered an injury, then went to Kansas State, and spent last year there as a backup. I know he didn't have a lot of stats last year, but there was a couple of games where the Wildcats starter got banged up, and he had to come in to finish drives that, if you look back on, and I read some of the articles, his teammates were really over the top about how prepared he always is, how they had complete trust and belief that he could come in and step in, and when he did, he got the job done. Both those drives resulted in points, I believe. So I'm encouraged. He's a former 4-star guy. He started his career at Penn State. Penn State for a couple of years, went to UConn, played a lot there at UConn, and then got injured, transferred to K-State. So I think he's one of those guys that's had a rough go of it, and he's looking for somebody to really believe in him. And he's looking for a team that needs him and that will lean into everything that he can do. And if you were laying out the scenario of what the coaching staff here did this year, that's it.
Does he remind you a lot of Mbana as a player, Scott?
Because he didn't play that much this year, I didn't really see athletically where he's at since the injury, but it's been enough time where I would feel like he's probably going to be recovered from that. So he can move, he can run, and he's got a big arm. And I think, it's the same. It's a similar situation as CJ. The coaches poured into CJ's cup this year. They told him, "You're going to be the guy, and we believe in you, and we're going to work, and we're going to get you there." And you saw a player, just off the basis of a coach having confidence in him and believing in him, just blossom before our eyes and get better every week. And I think here comes another player with, great physical talent and, skills. And he needs a coach that's going to believe in him, that he can be the guy. And I love also for him that he's stepping into a program at UB that we saw this year. How many different ways did they figure out to get CJ going? They always figured it out. They were multiple in the offense. They faced Toledo, and they just come out and say, "Guess what? We're running the inverted bone triple option on you like all day." And then they never do it again. It's a creative unit that has shown that it can get the best out of what you give them. Whatever you slide on the table, they're going to make you a good breakfast out of it. And I'm excited to put a player that was at one time a 4-star player coming out of high school, that was up for at one time being the starter at Penn State and played a bunch of games at Penn State and played at UConn, and giving him the opportunity at the Bulls, the chance that he really truly needs and deserves, and he's going to get it. And I think he's got the skills to really kind of make that pay off.
And he's got a lot of weapons coming back on offense as well.
Yes. I mean, for all the guys in red and all the guys that we know are coming back on defense, and, Solomon Brown getting an extra year coming back is going to be big there in the back end of that defense. We just had a 9-win season, and McMillan didn't even play.
That's right.
He played.
You got Snow and McMillan. You got
Yes.
Snow and McMillan as your receivers next year. You got Alge as your running back, and you have 3 starters back on the offensive line.
I don't remember the last time I felt good about the receivers at this point in the season. It feels like every year, by the end, you're like, oh, this guy was really helpful, and this guy was. But moving forward, maybe it's Antonio Nunn following the last time we were down in the Bahamas, and you're looking forward to the next year, or maybe it was a different. But generally speaking, it's like, all right, The O-line, there's some players coming back. The running backs, that's been pretty good the entire time we've been doing these games. But the receiver thing always tends to be a question. Heading in with two guys that I already believe in is that feels different to me. Does it feel different to you guys?
Yeah, it's not quite the same level of, hey, we're bringing back KJ Osborne and Anthony Johnson and Mabry, and we're adding in Charlie Jones. It's not quite that level, but it's bringing back, we saw the glimpse. McMillan can be the best wide receiver in the conference. When he's healthy, he's awesome. And then you're going to add in all the other guys that have now shown, hey, we can play here too. It's going to be exciting. And they just, not only are they going to have those three starters, Paul, but they're adding in a center transfer from the FCS ranks who has a ton of playing experience. So while he's not a starter on this unit, he's no spring chicken. He's not new to the game. So he's going to be a guy that's going to compete for starting jobs where it's not going to be necessarily 4 starters on that line, but you're going to have 4 guys that have started on that offensive line next year.
Yeah, and you got a whole group of young wide receivers that we saw some glimpses of in the preseason that never really got onto the field very much as the season went on. But a guy like a Patrick Clax and a Bobby Mays were really physically gifted kids that were true freshmen. That again, if you're gonna put it on the coaching staff to get these guys ready to play, there certainly is encouraging evidence that that's going to happen.
Plus the new freshmen coming in, all 2 or 3 of them. I believe there's 3 of them. They're all looking really good as well. One of them won a state championship down in Virginia this year. Running back LJ is still here, so you're going to have a 1,000-yard rusher returning for any quarterback, whoever it is that's going to step in there and win the job. And then, out of nowhere, I know you kind of, Paul, you kind of mentioned him, and his name is escaping me, but the local kid at running back that had a couple of runs there.
James McNeil.
James McNeil.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
He had the greatest one carry I've ever seen, right?
Yeah, I mean, he looked great. And Lamar Sperling got a lot more time there in the Bahamas Bowl, and a couple of screen passes that he turned into big plays. And, the cupboard is full there at some of those skill positions. And if you can find the right guy at quarterback, you could really start talking about start building, start stacking some of these winning seasons on top of each other.
All right. I think that's enough, unless anybody has anything else they would like to add. But that's our that to me sounds like a pretty good season recap and a little preview of what's coming up next year. Paul, Scott, anything else to add, or are we good?
No, I think we're good. I think we touched on a lot of good stuff there. Again, we live in a college football world now where a lot of this could get turned around, changed, blown up by the next time we have one of these discussions closer to the season. But but at least as we sit here now in January, you've got a coach and a staff that's mostly intact, and a roster that's mostly intact, which in itself moves you to the top 3 or 4 in the MAC, because very few teams in the MAC could say the same thing. So, I think that should make every Bulls fan be encouraged about where this program is going, because they figured out a way to have some continuity in a sport and a world where there is none.
And not to mention the fact that we're talking about a 9-win team that was essentially the same group of guys as the 3-win team. So, and now next year's team is essentially the same group of guys too. There's not a ton that's going to disappear between now and then as of right now, but it certainly seems like they're bringing back a team that improved by 6 wins over the course of last season, quarterback excluded. Obviously something is changing there, but it's very encouraging to see what they were able to get out of Agbana, considering how we felt about him heading into the season. So that's kind of I kind of check that box. All right, they'll figure that out too. It's not a given, but for the most part, this is the same group that won 3 games last year and then won 9, and then they get to try again next year, or this year, I guess we'll call it, because we're now into 2025. So I feel great. I'm excited. Great year. Great working with you guys for the 7 millionth year in a row, and look forward to doing it again.
See you in Minnesota.
Yes.
See ya.
All right. See ya.
I don't know about you guys. but I just want to get the hell out of here.